A tired waitress quietly touches the grand piano in a luxury restaurant, and seconds later, the wealthy guests fall silent as an unexpected melody fills the room. The restaurant glowed with soft golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, spreading warm reflections across polished wooden floors. Gentle music floated through the air while quiet conversations blended with the soft clinking of glasses and silver plates. Outside, the night sky was calm and dark. Large windows revealed a peaceful city street where streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement after a light evening rain. Inside the restaurant, everything looked perfect. Every table was covered with white cloths. Tall candles flickered softly beside elegant plates and sparkling glasses. Wealthy guests filled the room. Expensive suits and glittering dresses caught the light as people laughed and enjoyed their meals. But moving quietly between the tables was someone most people barely noticed. The Waitress. She walked quickly but carefully, balancing heavy trays filled with plates and drinks. Her uniform was simple, neat, and slightly worn from many long shifts. Her steps were calm, but her eyes often looked tired. She had already been working for nearly 10 hours. Still, she continued moving from table to table with patience and quiet focus. "Another bottle of sparkling water," one guest said without even looking up. "Yes, of course," she replied gently. She gave a small polite smile and walked toward the kitchen. In this restaurant, the guests were used to perfect service, but very few of them ever thought about the people who worked there. The waitress returned moments later with the bottle, carefully pouring water into crystal glasses. As she finished, her eyes moved across the room. They stopped at something familiar. The grand piano. It stood near the large window in the corner of the restaurant. Black, polished, and beautiful. A soft spotlight shined above it, making the smooth surface glow like glass every evening. A professional pianist played there during dinner. The music helped create the peaceful, luxurious atmosphere the restaurant was known for. Right now, the piano was quiet. The pianist had stepped away for a short break. The empty bench sat still under the light. The waitress looked at it for just a second longer than usual. Then she quickly looked away and continued working. But something about that piano always pulled her attention. As she passed nearby with another tray, she slowed slightly. Her eyes moved gently across the black and white keys. For a moment, her fingers twitched softly, almost like they remembered something. But she quickly kept walking. At another table, several wealthy guests were laughing loudly about business deals and vacations. One man leaned back in his chair. "This place is perfect," he said. "Great food, great music." Another guest nodded. "Yes. The pianist here is famous. I heard people come just to hear him play." The waitress placed their plates down carefully. "Enjoy your meal," she said softly. None of them looked at her. She turned and walked away. Near the kitchen doors, another worker whispered quietly, "Long night again." She nodded with a small smile. Almost done. But the truth was, the night still had many hours left. The restaurant became even busier as more guests arrived. New voices filled the room. The smell of fresh bread and warm meals drifted through the air. Outside, a cool wind moved gently through the quiet street. Inside, the waitress continued her routine. Serve drinks, clear plates, carry trays, smile politely, repeat. Again and again. Yet every time she passed the piano, her eyes slowly moved toward it. The keys seemed to shine brighter under the soft light, almost like they were waiting. At one moment, she paused near the window to place fresh napkins on a nearby table. From here, she could see the piano clearly. The bench, the smooth lid, the silent keys. A memory slowly appeared in her mind. A small room many years ago. Sunlight through thin curtains. An old piano in the corner. Younger hands practicing simple melodies again and again. Her shoulders lifted slightly as she breathed in. For a brief moment, her tired face softened, but the sound of a plate clinking behind her quickly pulled her back. "Table 6 needs service?" The manager called calmly. "Yes," she replied quickly. The memory disappeared as fast as it came. She hurried across the room again. The night continued moving forward. Guests talked happily, while soft music played once more as the professional pianist returned to the bench. His fingers moved smoothly across the keys. The melody was elegant and controlled. The guests seemed pleased. Many nodded while continuing their conversations. But as the waitress passed by, carrying another tray, she listened carefully. Not with the casual ears of a customer, but with the quiet attention of someone who understood music deeply. Her eyes lowered slightly as if following each note in her mind. The pianist finished the song and stood up. Several guests clapped politely. He gave a small bow and walked toward the back hallway again. Another short break. The piano became silent once more. For a moment, the restaurant noise filled the space where the music had been. Laughter. Glasses clinking, low voices talking. The waitress walked past again. She slowed just a little. No one stood near the piano. The bench was empty. Her hands tightened gently around the tray she was carrying. Her breathing slowed. The keys were so close now, only a few steps away. For a brief moment, it felt like the world around her moved slightly slower. Then someone called out from across the room. "Excuse me. More bread. Please." The moment ended. She turned quickly. "Of course," she answered. And once again, she walked away from the piano. But something inside her had already begun to change. A quiet feeling, a memory waking up. A small spark she had tried to ignore for many years. Tonight, in this glowing restaurant filled with strangers and music, that quiet spark was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. And somewhere deep in her heart, a melody she had not played in a very long time was beginning to return. A quiet feeling, a memory waking up. A small spark she had tried to ignore for many years. Tonight, in this glowing restaurant filled with strangers and music, that quiet spark was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. And somewhere deep in her heart, a melody she had not played in a very long time was beginning to return. The restaurant continued buzzing with conversations and soft laughter. Plates moved across tables. Glasses clinked gently. But near the window, the grand piano waited silently under the warm spotlight. The professional pianist still had not returned. At first, no one noticed. Most guests were busy with their meals and conversations, but after several minutes, the absence of music slowly changed the mood of the room. The silence near the piano felt unusual. One guest leaned back in his chair. "Where did the pianist go?" he asked casually. Another guest looked toward the empty bench. Maybe another break. The manager stood near the entrance, checking the room carefully. A small line appeared on his forehead. He looked toward the hallway where the pianist had disappeared. Still no sign of him. The guests were starting to notice now. A quiet restaurant without music felt strangely incomplete. The manager walked quickly toward the kitchen, speaking softly to another employee. The pianist had to leave early, the worker whispered. The manager sighed quietly. Tonight was a busy night. Wealthy guests filled almost every table. Music was part of the restaurant's charm. Without it, the atmosphere felt different. He glanced toward the silent piano again. Then he looked around the room, thinking quickly. At a nearby table, a group of guests noticed the empty stage. One of them laughed lightly. "Well, someone should play something," he joked. Another guest looked toward the staff, moving around the room. He pointed toward the waitress. "What about her?" he said with a playful smile. "She's been walking past the piano all night." The table burst into light laughter. The waitress had just finished placing a plate on another table when she heard the comment. Her steps slowed. She felt several eyes turning toward her. "Can you play the piano?" one guest asked jokingly. More laughter followed. The question was not serious. It was just playful entertainment for the evening. The waitress stood still for a moment. Her hands tightened slightly around the empty tray she was holding. The manager looked at her quickly, unsure how to respond. No, he said politely to the guests. "She's busy with service." But one of the guests smiled. "Come on. Just one song? It could be fun." The room became quieter. More people turned their heads toward the piano now. The spotlight still shined gently on the empty bench. The waitress looked down at the tray in her hands. Her heart was beating faster. For many years, she had kept that part of her life hidden. Music belonged to another time, another version of herself. But tonight, the piano felt closer than ever before. The manager walked toward her. Slowly. "You don't have to," he whispered kindly. She looked toward the piano again. The polished black surface reflected the warm light above it. The keys waited quietly. Her fingers remembered them, every note, every movement. She took a slow breath. Then she placed the tray carefully on a nearby table. The restaurant became completely silent. Guests stopped talking. Even the workers paused. The waitress walked slowly toward the piano. Her steps were calm, but inside her chest, her heart was racing. Some guests smiled, expecting something silly or awkward. Others watched with curiosity. She reached the bench and paused for a moment. The warm spotlight surrounded her. Outside the large window, the streetlights glowed softly in the wet night. She gently pulled the bench closer. Then she sat down. For a moment, she did not move. Her eyes looked down at the keys. Black and white, familiar dot. Her hands slowly lifted. The room held its breath. Then her fingers touched the piano. First note was soft, dot clear. Beautiful. It floated gently through the restaurant like a quiet whisper. The laughter disappeared instantly. Her fingers moved. Another note followed. Then another. The melody began slowly, almost like a memory, carefully waking up. But within seconds, something changed. Her hands moved with confidence. Grace, emotion. The melody grew richer and deeper. It filled the room with warmth and feeling. Guests leaned forward in their chairs. Conversations stopped completely. The restaurant that had once been full of noise now felt peaceful and still. No one expected this. The waitress who had been carrying plates all night was now creating something beautiful. Her face looked calm under the golden light. Her eyes remained gently closed as she played. Each note carried emotion. Years of quiet practice. Years of forgotten dreams. The melody moved like a story, soft and gentle in one moment, strong and powerful in the next. A guest near the front slowly lowered his glass. Another person whispered softly, "Wow." But most people said nothing. They simply listened. The manager stood near the doorway, completely still. Even he had not expected this. The waitress continued playing. Her fingers danced across the keys effortlessly. The music felt alive. It flowed through the restaurant like a warm river of sound. Outside, the night wind brushed softly against the windows. Inside, time seemed to pause. The melody slowly reached its highest moment. Powerful, emotional, full of earth. Then it began to soften again. The final notes arrived like quiet falling snow. Gentle, peaceful, beautiful. Her fingers rested on the keys for a moment longer. Then the music stopped. The room stayed silent. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. No one moved. 10 suddenly. Someone began clapping. Another person joined. Then, another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted with applause. Guests stood from their chairs. The sound of clapping filled the room like thunder. The same people who had laughed earlier now looked at her with amazement. Some guests smiled warmly. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The waitress slowly stood from the bench. Her cheeks were slightly red, but her expression was peaceful. For the first time that night, she looked truly happy. The manager walked toward her with wide eyes. "I had no idea," he said quietly. She gave a small, humble smile. "It has been a long time," she replied softly. Around them, the applause continued, but something more important had already happened. The room had seen something real. Not a famous performer, not a planned show, just a hidden talent, finally allowed to breathe again. Sometimes the world sees only the role someone plays. a waiter, a cleaner, a worker. But behind quiet lives can live extraordinary stories, extraordinary gifts. And sometimes all it takes is one unexpected moment for those gifts to shine. The grand piano stood silently again, but now it felt different. Because tonight, in a restaurant filled with strangers, a forgotten melody had found its way home. And everyone in the room would remember that moment for a very long time. If this story touched your heart, leave a like so more people can hear stories like this. Because sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the people we least expect.